Okay, so we have a quorum, and I think a few folks will be probably coming on in addition, but let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Forestry Commission meeting, and do we have any public comment signups?
As of Michelle, we didn't have any when I checked on yesterday.
Okay, then let's move on to the, oh yes, thank you. We have a new person here today, Michelle Tran.
Yeah.
And it's filling in for Brian today. Thank you, Michelle, for coming. And we also have others who'll be speaking later. Then, so in terms of meeting minutes, we had one comment in from Commissioner Nelson. Commissioner Nelson, would you like to share yours because it is substantive?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. When I suggested the idea of shade shelters, let's see, the text that was in the minutes was Commissioner Nelson recommended looking at structures to provide trees where space for trees is not available. It's actually, the structures don't have anything to do with trees. It's just if you cannot plant trees there, put something else there that provides shade. I think that's done in some towns in Arizona. So just throwing it out as an idea. I'm sure Peabody it's not in their budget, but I'm just throwing it out as an idea that maybe can be explored. So replace the word trees with shade.
Okay, are there any other comments on the minutes? I have one in the same section, Michelle, on 22nd Avenue, and that is, it said that I said that we'd like the BES and Water to attend a meeting to discuss their objections to planting street trees. And what I had said was, I think it'd be good if they came and told us about all the laws, you know, all the rules, codes, and standard operating procedures that are on the books relating to trees and where there might be conflicts. Because right now we don't really know kind of what's written anywhere and what's being done kind of as standard operating procedures or convention. And I think it would just be really nice to kind of have us to have real understanding of where the infrastructure bureaus are with their facilities related to trees. So I can give you some short language on that if you like, but that's what that's after. There are a couple more typos, but I'll just tell you about those later. So if there are no other comments, can we consider a motion to approve the minutes? Thanks, Commissioner Nelson.
I move that we approve the minutes as amended.
Great. Second, please.
I second that.
Thanks, Commissioner McMillan. All in favor? Any objections? Any abstentions? Great. So next is the City Forester's report.
Good morning, all. Good to see you. At some point during my report, Sarah Huggins from Parks will be joining us to give an update on the Sustainable Future project. So we'll just wait for her to come in. In the meantime, first up, we're all familiar with the government transition. I'll refresh a little bit since there's so many things going on these days. That is the City of Portland's project to implement the voters' desire to change Portland's form of government. And this past week, a new organization chart came out for how government might be organized under the new structure. Previously, Parks had been in the Public Works bucket, for lack of a better term, along with Bureau of Environmental Services, Bureau of Transportation, and Portland Water Bureau. With the latest and greatest organization chart that's come out, Parks is not in the Public Works bucket, but in a different bucket with the Portland Children's Levy Fund. I'll put a link in the chat so you can go right to that webpage and see the organization chart and what information is offered there. As a reminder, this is a work in progress for the city, led by our Chief Administrative Officer, Michael Jordan. I believe council will be making some decisions on November 1st about the structure of government in the future. Move on to another one. Actually, should I take any questions on that before I move on?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you say that Parks is going to be under a different umbrella than urban forestry?
No. Okay, thanks for asking, Commissioner Clapp, because that gives me an opportunity to clarify. Parks is still everything that Parks has, according to these organization charts. They're at a pretty high level. They're putting bureaus in different places and things that are comparable, organization parts that are comparable to bureaus. So the change from the last iteration of the proposed org chart is, instead of being in the public works grouping, Parks, including urban forestry, is now in a different grouping with the Portland Children's Levy. It is just Parks and Recreation, including urban forestry again, and the Children's Levy in that grouping.
Commissioner Nelson?
So that's a change where in an earlier iteration, they were putting parks with various natural resources things, the Water Bureau, BES, and that sort of thing. Is that right?
Yes, the previous iteration had a public works grouping that included Bureau of Transportation, Bureau of Environmental Services, Portland Water Bureau, and Portland Parks and Recreation. Now Parks and Rec is not in that grouping.
Do you know the rationale for that change?
I do not.
It sounds very bizarre.
Do we have an opportunity to lobby for a different placement?
Yes. I believe, I'm checking right now the link, which I will put in the chat. To see if there's an avenue to make comments in the website.
While you're looking, if there's a timeline, remind us of that decision making.
My understanding is that there will be council action on this on November 1st, Wednesday, November 1st. I'm not seeing a contact on it on this page. However, those decisions are being made by City Council, and all Portlanders are always welcome to contact City Council if they have opinions, needs, or concerns.
Thank you.
So that's the way I would handle that. Okay. Then, separate item. I believe you'll all remember HPAC, the Housing Production Advisory Council that Governor Kotek convened. And we've had discussion about that here in the commission meetings, and you all drafted a letter to send to City Council, giving input on the proposals that have been forwarded by HPAC. The Parks Board has also been tracking the Housing Production Advisory Council activities and discussing at their Parks Board meetings. And as a reminder, Commissioner Feldstein also serves on the Parks Board. Parks Board also has been interested in commenting on the HPAC proposals and is supportive of the Urban Forestry Commission's letter. And at their last meeting, had a discussion about should they write a separate letter or sign on to the commission's letter. And they voted to sign on to the commission's letter. And so I'll put in the chat the final version of that letter. We've worked on it to reflect both the Parks Board and the Urban Forestry Commission for your consideration. In your previous discussions, this hadn't been part of what we talked about, that the Parks Board would be part of the letter. So we would need for the commission today to decide that they too are okay, for you all to decide you two are okay with the Parks Board joining on to the commission's letter. And I'll put that in the chat now. So we're looking for a vote on that.
Just one other kind of comment about that. Co-Chair Feldstein and myself, we met with the co-chair of the Parks Board and discussed this before they took their vote. And they were excited at the opportunity to collaborate more with the Urban Forestry Commission. Corbin's is her title, and they said that they'd really like to look for opportunities to discuss issues like this and others with the Urban Forestry Commission and bring the Parks Board and Forestry Commission more into contact. So that's kind of an exciting concept to think about, and I think it's a positive step that they'd like to join into the letter. And there's been no changes to the text except for to acknowledge that it's a joint letter, and we made a heading that has the names of both bodies on the top, so the council would know who it's coming from.
Great, and I think I need to email it to you. I can't seem to put it in the chat.
There's the updated chart recommendation. That's not what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's from the previous topic, but thanks for pointing that out. It's on its way to you.
So if you all are okay with the concept of them joining and putting the signatures of their two co-chairs on with ours, then we could go ahead to a vote. Or if you feel like you need more time to look at the letter, we can pick this up later in the agenda. Anyone want some more time, or? We have a motion to approve the Parks Board signing on to the Forestry Commission's letter to the City Council about looking at housing and trees in the urban forest together.
This is Darilee. I move.
Thank you. Second? Bruce is holding up two fingers. He's the second. All in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Great, passed. Thank you.
Good, thank you. I was at the Parks Board meeting when they discussed this most recently, and I wanted to share with you that part of their discussion was, would it be more powerful, so to speak, to have both advisory groups on one letter or not, and they determined it would be. And there was also discussion, like Commissioner Jortner just mentioned, of working together more in the future and trying to leverage the common interests of the two advisory bodies. So that was very interesting. All right, then there is no real update today on the urban forest plan project to update that plan. Later in the agenda, Belinda Udelman will be talking with you about selecting representatives from among your commissioners. But otherwise, everything is on track and there's no update to give on that. We have several positions open now in urban forestry that I wanted to talk about today and ask for your assistance in spreading the word about them. Most of them are part of the PCEF, Portland Clean Energy Fund, Equitable Tree Canopy Initiative. And we're right now starting to hire the staff that will be leading development of that new and exciting program. So it's really important that we get the word out and hopefully get really robust applicant pools for that. The positions we're hiring for right now for the PCEF program are a business systems analyst. That's somebody who does computers, software, IT, a GIS technician, geographic information systems, also a planting program supervisor 2, a tree planting specialist, and a tree planting technology and procurement coordinator. That position will be working a lot on developing contracting and procurement systems, as well as website content and managing a web page that'll be about equitable tree canopy. That'll include a landing site where folks can just sign up really easily to be involved. And there's another position also currently posted that's not related to the Equitable Tree Canopy Initiative, but rather our other work, and that is a permitting and regulation coordinator position in Manager Casey Joker's team. So I'll put that link in the chat. Reminder that the city of Portland posts new jobs every Monday. There is a way to sign up to get those emails if people want to do that. And again, if you could please spread the word about those positions. We're really looking for folks who will improve our team and be able to do a great job in those positions.
Forestry, Cairo, one question on that. I believe that as part of PSEP, the City Council passed another component, the climate investment plan, that included funds for maintenance of existing trees, existing mature trees, to a pilot for that.
That's right.
Need-based, I think. And I was curious if will there be any hiring around that as well, and what the timing is relative to the Equitable Tree Canopy program.
Great question. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, that did pass council recently. And because that is a separate process, we haven't gotten that far yet. If you recall, Equitable Tree Canopy was approved by council, I believe, last January. And so we've been focused on that. Now that the tree maintenance funding has been approved by council, we'll be working on that with the PSEP folks over in Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. So more to come. Don't know yet.
Great.
I was hoping that Sarah Huggins would be here. Ahead of schedule, maybe. I
am here, Jen.
Oh, you are?
I'm just on screen. Hi.
Thank you. Oh, you're me. Yeah, how interesting. You're appearing with my name. Hi, Sarah Huggins.
I'm actually Sarah Huggins.
Okay. So Sarah, since you're here today, do you want to cover the whole topic, or would you still like me to cover it and you handle questions?
Oh, I'm happy to cover it. Sure. I
Great.
wonder if I'm you because I used your Zoom link.
Well, now you're you, so we
okay.
Worked it out.
Great.
Okay, so I'll do an introduction. Commissioners, this is Sarah Huggins. She may be familiar to some of you. Sarah is the manager of the Parks and Recreation Sustainable Future Project, and she's here to give an update on that. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. So in previous Sustainable Future briefings that we've shared with you, we provided some information about kind of the state of our critical funding needs. And in those presentations, as part of it, we highlighted kind of the critical need to really address our Bureau's capital maintenance backlog. And as we've been sort of looking at what are the right next steps for the Sustainable Future work, a funding ballot measure really remains one of the most viable near-term options to begin addressing those critical capital maintenance backlog needs. We, as a Bureau, last conducted a voter poll in 2020, and that was the poll that really informed us moving forward at the time with the Parks Levy. And we are getting ready to update our understanding of current voter sentiment. So we're doing another poll this fall. We're contracting with the same polling firm that we used in 2020. They're called FM3. They've also done sort of Metro's levy polling as well. And we are working right now with other council offices to develop those polling questions with the goal of having the poll conducted next month in November. And then we should be in a position to be sharing results from the poll back in December. At this time, we're planning to test voter support for both a May and a November 2024 ballot. And the poll would include some voter opinion questions for city infrastructure beyond park infrastructure as well. So based on our conversations with other council offices, we'll see if there's some areas of joint interest. And then depending on the commissioner's direction upon kind of reviewing the poll results, this could be a step towards a future ballot initiative in 2024. And at this time, we're looking at polling both a renewal of the 5-year Parks Levy, which is providing significant support for urban forestry, including sort of preventative tree maintenance, new program, and other support, I think. if my memory serves, about 37 new positions since the passage of the levy have been approved to be added to the urban forestry team. And also testing support for various sizes of bonds, which could address that capital maintenance backlog. So a short update, we're happy to share results with you in December and happy to answer any questions.
Clap.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. I'm curious if you have included trees as infrastructure in this survey that you're going to be sending out.
So as it relates to levy renewal, trees are certainly included. So that would include sort of sustained support for all of the things that the Parks Levy right now is supporting in terms of urban forestry operations and services. As it relates to a bond, trees are often included in capital projects. So when we add new parks, change parks, tree planting is often included. And we have critical maintenance backlog needs at urban forestry facilities as well. So out at Delta Yard, the prior 2014 replacement bond was able to make improvements, but it is not yet at a place where all of its critical capital maintenance needs have been met. So both in terms of trees included in capital projects and in terms of the infrastructure needed to support delivering tree services, those could be included in a capital bond.
Sure, I want to be a little more specific with my question as trees as infrastructure, not the infrastructure to plant trees or the urban forestry buildings and things like that, but including them as infrastructure to be maintained the same as any other piece of infrastructure that the parks own. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I appreciate the clarification. So that is a nut we have not yet cracked. The urban forestry team and I, prior to COVID, had some discussions with our city's bond council around the eligibility of tree maintenance. And we're committed to continuing those conversations, but we have not reached a point where they were able to confirm eligibility for us. And in fact, I think they actually left it as they weren't seeing a path to eligibility. Because there wasn't really the documentation and the proof of certain tree maintenance activities extending the life of a tree in the same way that they have that information and documentation around built infrastructure. So regular maintenance is not sort of a bond eligible type of activity, but maintenance sort of above and beyond that can extend the life of a facility can be eligible.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So conversations can continue, but we have not gotten to a point where we think that's eligible currently.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Nelson.
The 5-year levy that was passed, how much money was that for? And then kind of the follow-up is the backlog of capital improvements for the parks. Is it 700 million, 800 million? Billion? Where's it at? I mean, yeah, I like some numbers.
Sure. So the capital maintenance backlog is $600 million right now. And that includes things throughout the park system. The majority of that, the value of that backlog is related to sort of buildings and pools and those large built infrastructure, but it includes pathways and playgrounds and culverts and all kinds of things throughout the park system. The value of the levy. So right now the levy is an 80 cent per $1,000 of assessed value levy, and it's bringing in an average of $48 million a year for its 5-year term. So right around 240 million for the full life of the 5-year levy.
So if we're looking at capital improvement, we're talking about a very substantial, assuming the idea is we actually want to take care of the capital improvement needs as opposed to put them off a little longer, that's a fairly substantial cost.
So right now, the 3 scenarios we're polling would be a bond at 250 million, 400 million, and 600 million. None of those would completely get rid of the backlog. It's a backlog that we as a system have built up over decades, but what it could allow us to do is begin addressing those sort of most critical things that are nearest to failure and starting to make progress on reducing that backlog. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sarah?
I have a follow-up question, but it would be for City Forester Cairo in response. Per my last question, I'm curious if urban forestry or anyone under your purview would be able to work with Sarah to express that urban forestry or urban trees are infrastructure that should be included in this. The first thing I think of in terms of maintenance to extend the life of a tree would be young tree maintenance, where a tree, if it grows up and it's taken care of, then it'll last for much longer if it was pruned properly when it was small. So as a capital improvement project, and throughout the city, trees are considered infrastructure. That's why we work with development and things like this. Also, throughout the scientific literature, it's also considered infrastructure. So if there is a way to push that over the line with the group that you're talking about, Sarah, that can't quite find a path to get to that, was wondering if perhaps you would be able to have someone in your office help provide literature to say, here is the rationale as to why this should be considered infrastructure and be included in this. Not necessarily that the money has to be spent on that, but that there is an option available to extend the life of our trees as infrastructure pieces in the city. Is that something that can happen?
Thanks, Commissioner Clapp. That is something that has happened and continues to happen. And I think Sarah now knows more about our horticulture and trees as infrastructure than she did before for a couple of years now.
Excellent.
The challenge is kind of outside of us and parks. It's a bigger critter to tackle, but we continue to work on it. And I will say this, if you have, or any commissioners have, any resources like peer-reviewed publications that would help make that argument and demonstrate the capital value of trees as infrastructure, please do send them on to Brian and I, and we'll share them on with Sarah.
Okay.
Sarah, do you want to add anything to that?
Maybe just, I don't believe the hiccup was the capital value of trees. The hiccup was, how can you show, so sort of regular pruning and maintenance to trees is an expected maintenance activity that should be ongoing. So how can you show a level of maintenance that's beyond that? So the delta beyond kind of like what a tree regularly should be seeing, that you can show how that extends the life of a tree for a certain amount of time.
Okay.
And Sarah, what you're saying, I think, so make sure I understand, is that that additional increment is necessary for capital funding, for bond funding. That otherwise we're sort of relegated to funding with general funds for routine operation and maintenance. Is that the distinction?
Right. Yes. So there's a couple thresholds. There's a threshold if something is sort of capitalizable, and then there's another threshold for if it's bond eligible. And that's kind of the delta of, is this sort of maintenance beyond kind of the regular routine that we can show we're doing in a way that will extend the life of that asset for a certain amount of time, and how much time? Yeah.
Have you, I believe there was a moment in time when the Bureau of Environmental Services got approval to maintain trees within bioswales using capital dollars or bond money. And I was wondering if, because it was trees and vegetation that they were dealing with, if there's something we can glean from that. It may not be totally analogous, but it might be worth looking into.
Yeah, that sounds great. We've definitely seen examples of larger restoration projects being included, but that particular like tree maintenance nut as a sort of a standalone category of project, we haven't. So that's great.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Commissioner Meisner.
I'm in seconds. Thank you. So what it sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, part of this sounds like it's almost like an accounting issue over the definitions of what's capitalizable. And then the other aspect is the legal implications of it being bond eligible.
Very well stated, yes.
Thank you.
City Forester Power. Yeah, hands up.
I wanted to clarify too, it's not just trees where we have this struggle, it's really nature in general, as opposed to built things. Our culture and systems are more adept at valuing in dollars built things than nature.
Oh, one last thing. I can look into the accounting codes for trees. I just want to put that out there.
That would be wonderful. Appreciate that, Mr. Meisner.
Do you have one?
Thank you.
So thanks to Joey Furturo. In the chat is more information about the government transition and the most current organization chart. Just wanted to make sure that you saw that. Oh, thank you, Sarah. I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Sarah Huggins. If you're leaving now.
Thank you, Sarah Huggins.
Thank you all.
And at the bottom, so I pasted in what Joey sent me. Thank you, Joey. At the bottom, it says feedback will be collected until September 29th. We think that feedback continues to be collected. That's just an earlier iteration of that message from previous organization charts. So there's a contact email in there if you'd like to submit comments on proposed reorganization. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to permitting regulations overview. Casey Jogerst is here to tell us about that.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I am going to try to share my screen and we'll see. I keep getting bumped off the network, so heads up, Michelle. And I'm going to throw something in the chat now before I lose my screen so that you have it. Okay. Everybody can hear me okay? Okay. So good morning, I'm Casey Jogerst. I think I've been here a couple weeks ago, but for those of you that maybe weren't here, I'm the Urban Forestry Permitting and Regulation Manager. So I work directly with Jen Cairo and then the other managers within our division, Angie DeSalvo and Paul Anderson. But my purview is specific to permitting and regulation. And within permitting and regulation, we have now 5 teams, which previously were 4 teams, and I'll get a little bit into that. I think that you've heard a bit about the team, so I'll kind of go through this in a more general sense, and then they're going to go into talking about the teams and some relationships of how we charge fees with the work that those teams do. So that link that I put in the chat is a link to the fee schedule if you want to open it up and have it available for when we're talking about it. So again, permitting and regulation is really the primary implementer of the tree code. That is sort of our guiding document for the work that we do. And as I mentioned, we have these 5 teams. So kind of starting there on the left, we have our single point of contact, which is referred to as our tree tech team. They are the intake for really all of urban forestry and for all things tree throughout the city. So although they're housed in urban forestry, they answer tree questions about anything and everything. And one important note that I want to make is that the tree tech team is not sort of a connector service or a phone service. Their role is to really try to find the answers and respond to the inquiries that come in rather than taking the call and connecting them to somebody else. And sometimes that may be what needs to happen because it's not a question that is for us, but primarily they're doing a lot of research and answering questions. But additionally, they're doing plan review and development, just sort of a preliminary type of plan review, which again, I'll get into a little bit more as we move on. They are issuing certain types of permits that are considered what we call sort of over the counter, a little bit more straightforward. And again, they're doing all of our intake. So everything that the permitting and regulation team does is first touched by the tree techs and then is sort of assigned out through various databases and such. Next along there, we have our non-development team. Non-development is sort of the residential folks. So private property owners that want to do really anything to their trees, that's the team that is primarily facilitating those permits. So for example, if somebody wants to remove a private tree or a street tree, that's the team that receives that application to process it. And that team's made up of tree inspectors. In private development, pretty indicative of what the name it is. So that's the development where, for example, new single family residence buildings are being constructed. It could also be commercial buildings that are being constructed. And in that team, we're also looking at tree inspectors who are processing those applications and performing plan review. And there's a little bit more complexity to that I'll get into a little bit more as we sort of start to look at the fee schedule in relationship to the work that they do. Capital improvement projects, that is related to what Sarah was just talking about, so capitally funded work. Primarily it's work that the city is doing to improve the infrastructure of our city. And so that's us working with almost every bureau. And that can be a street repaving project, it could be a brand new park, it could be a reconstruction of sewers, anything that the city is doing to really improve the infrastructure or build new infrastructure. And that again is a team of tree inspectors. And then our newest team is our code compliance team. This is thanks to the levy and is currently in the process of being formed. Right now there is a supervisor and there's 2 tree inspectors, but there are additional staff that are in the process of being hired. And this team is the team that's responding to essentially alleged violations. So calls that might come in to the single point of contact where maybe a neighbor's wondering if a tree that was cut down was permitted to be cut down. Nuisance situations, so if somebody sees something that appears to be dangerous, a tree that appears to be dangerous, that's the team that would go out to inspect that and determine the course of action. And they're also doing emergency follow-up. So our operations teams are the primary responders when there are emergency tree situations. And they essentially take care of what the hazard at that moment is. And then this team comes in after the fact to sort of correct the situation and let the property owner know perhaps maybe a stump needs to be ground out and a tree replaced. That's the team that is processing those types of situations. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Then moving along here, I just wanted to put some names to some of the teams here and really to just demonstrate how much we've grown over a really short period of time. So when I started here in 2013, it was me and 5 tree inspectors. So that what you're looking at right now is the growth in 10 years from 6 people to, I don't know the count offhand, but it's been a pretty significant amount of growth and a really, really positive thing. I'm sure that you've heard a lot about the tree code and implementation, so I won't go into it to too much detail, but when the new tree code was implemented in 2015, we began regulating all private trees that are 12 inches and greater. And that was something that we did not do previously. So that's a pretty significant percentage of trees that suddenly the urban forestry staff was responsible for regulating. And with that, we did not receive the staff that we really needed to. So it's been great to see that over the years, there's been the ability to continue to grow the staff to really successfully and in due diligence respond to the inquiries and the needs of the public as it relates to their trees. Still a work in progress, but definitely improvement from where we've been in the past. So again, I put the link in the chat here. This is the urban forestry fee schedule. The urban forestry fee schedule is also something that came about with the implementation of the tree code in 2015. We did not have one previously, and it has changed and modified over the years. But again, I just point out that it hasn't been around for that long. and continues to be a work in progress. And I'll keep referencing somewhat back to this to kind of, again, like help relate the work that the teams are doing in relationship to the fees that we may charge for those services. So again, here we are with the single point of contact. And I gave you the overview. So what I want to do here is kind of talk about the work that they do and where there are some relationship to those fees. So as I mentioned, there are these permits that are called over-the-counter permits. We, in the pandemic, started calling them same-day permits since nobody was coming into an actual place any longer. And those permits are where the code has very black and white criteria for a permit issuance. And for example, that is within 10 feet of a building or attached structure. And so in our permitting application process, there's requirements for applicants to provide us photographs and essentially evidence that they do have a tree, private tree, within 10 feet of a building or attached structure. And that's a type of permit that the tree techs can issue without it ever having to get assigned out to a tree inspector. And so on the fee schedule, if you go to the non-development section of it, you would see removal and replant. And so that would be an applicable fee for that type of permit that's being processed by the tree techs. There's a few others that they can issue. Some certain nuisance trees that are on private property. That's another type that the tree techs can issue. And then up to 4 healthy, smaller than 20-inch trees on private property is, again, another sort of straightforward criteria in the code that doesn't require arboricultural knowledge. It's more of a checkbox of, do you meet this criteria? And therefore the tree techs can issue it. So those are some examples in terms of like what the tree techs can issue, which is pretty minimal. Again, it's what they can issue doesn't have a relationship to needing arboricultural knowledge or, for example, International Society of Arboriculture certifications, with which all of our tree inspectors are required to have so that they can make on-site assessments. So moving along to the non-development team, I mentioned that they're primarily, not exclusively though, working with private property owners. And so the bread and butter of what this team does is removal and replant applications. And again, you're looking at the non-development section of the tree code or of the fee schedule that you have there. I don't actually have it in front of me because I'm sharing my screen. Thank you. And so you'll see that, you know, the very first line, there's a removal application, and then there's a difference in fee in relationship to the number of trees. Property owners can also request a waiver to replant. And essentially what that means is that do they meet on-site density as it relates to the tree code and density requirements? Density meaning how many trees do you already have on your property? I won't go into detail there because it'll take us down a little bit of a road, but that is something that people can apply for and pay for. And that's because it does require an on-site assessment. It takes a bit of time for the tree inspectors to go and assess an individual's property, especially if you can imagine some of the properties may be out in the Southwest that have lots and lots of trees on their property. And then as you can see, there's a number of different types of permits here, pretty straightforward. On the screen there, on the bottom right-hand side, you're looking at one of our current tree inspectors, Dylan Saito, who's performing a root inspection. So this is another type of inspection done by the non-development team, where perhaps somebody either voluntarily or is required to repair their sidewalk, and there's some tree roots that are there. And so once the sidewalk is lifted, tree inspectors are called out and they take a look at what's there, and what you're seeing Dylan do here is spray paint the roots that can be cut in order to help facilitate the replacement of the sidewalk. And there is also a cost for that inspection. So essentially what you're looking at with non-development is we're getting requested for something, whether it be to remove a tree, to prune a tree, to perform a root inspection, and we're going out on site to perform that inspection and issue a permit or a decision rather it's not always a permit that's getting issued. And I'll come back around at the end for questions, but I'll just get through these first and hopefully with enough time left over. So moving into development, this is probably the more, I don't know, complex, I guess more robust area of the work that we do. And you can see that from looking at the fee schedule. It is the biggest section of our fee schedule. And there are a number of different types of work that we do in development. And you can kind of think about it with being in the right of way, where our street trees are, and then also on the private property. And so we are, as urban forestry, primarily responsible for the street trees. And so what's happening within the right of way. So for example, what you're looking at here is although it does look like a residential, I don't know if it's a single family residential, but some type of residential home. So on the left-hand side is the beginning of the construction. Might be a little bit difficult to see, but there is some tree protection that's placed around that street tree. And then you can see on the top right-hand side that the sidewalk was accommodated, or rather the tree was accommodated by the sidewalk being sort of bumped out in order to allow for that tree to be retained and protected in place. And then the bottom, you can see there what the final product there is. And so this again is the development team's responsibilities. So what happens is that, let's say a residential application, building permit application comes through the door. So if you look at your fee schedule, you'd be looking at a residential construction. And so there is that's like the initiation of us taking part in a building permit where the plans are coming in and we're assessing those plans to determine, do you have existing street trees? And as in this case, there are existing street trees, and so therefore we need to apply preservation requirements. Or it might be that, do you need to plant street trees? In this case, it doesn't look like it, can't say for sure, but we're doing those. So we're performing a plan review and we're applying the tree code to what's been proposed for that project. And again, this requires both in-office sort of plan review as well as on-site inspections. And that's just for the right-of-way piece of it. So then on the private side, the Bureau of Development Services is responsible for the review of the plan for the private side. But this is where it gets a little tricky. Once that building permit has been issued, it is urban forestry's responsibility to go and perform a site inspection to confirm that preservation and tree protection requirements on site are in place according to the plan. And that's where
What are we supposed to do? People listen.
Stand by for an important message. Hello, we are currently conducting an earthquake drill as part of the Great Oregon Shakeout. Please drop, cover, and hold on. Repeat, we are currently conducting an earthquake drill. Please drop, cover, and hold on. Begin by taking cover under the nearest desk, table, or next to an interior wall, just as you would during a real earthquake. If you are in a wheelchair, lock your wheels and cover your head with your arms. Do not evacuate the building.
All right, you guys laughing under the table is the best part of this. Oh my gosh.
Supposed to do it for a minute. It's a minute. Like it's a minute, they'll tell us. Oh, they tell us statewide it's a minute. I don't think he said that.
It feels like grade school.
It does feel like grade school.
That's why we're laughing.
Survive.
All clear, all clear. The drill is over. You may resume your typical activities. Please do not evacuate. Repeat, all clear, all clear. You may resume your typical activities. Please do not evacuate. This concludes the Great Oregon Shakeout Earthquake Drill. Thank you for participating.
Okay, with that, let's dive back into some development. So I think I was talking about on the private side. And so our tree inspectors are going out there to confirm if the tree protection is in place according to the approved plans. And so if you're looking at your fee schedule, we have preservation inspection. So again, that's a relationship to like when we're going out there to confirm that, that's the fee that's being charged. And shifting a little bit back to the public right of way, because this is an important one and it's on this fee schedule as well. When a building permit application comes in, we review it as well as all the other infrastructure bureaus as well. And so PBOT in their review make a determination as to whether there needs to be right of way improvements. There are certain triggers. I don't know all the triggers myself, what they are, but it may be they need to dedicate a certain aspect of the property to the right of way in order to reconstruct the right of way according to what PBOT's standards are. And when PBOT's review triggers this, it's called a public works permit. And so if you look on the schedule, you'll see that there's public works components on there. So we participate really heavily. That is where most of the right of way tree work is done if a public works is triggered. So sometimes it's just in a building permit because a public works permit isn't triggered. And then if a public works permit is triggered, all our work is being handled sort of within what is ultimately a public works permit associated with that permit building application. So there's a variety of different fees for that what you're looking at here is the public works review, again, just to take a look, see what's happening with it. And then there's the final inspection. So this is sort of the bottom right-hand corner there. So after everything's been said and done, urban forestry tree inspectors have to go out to confirm were trees planted according to the plan within a public works permit. And that is the final inspection. If they fail that final inspection and we have to come back, that's what you see on the fee schedule is a public works re-inspection. There are cases where tree inspectors need to come back 2, 3, 4 times because it just hasn't been corrected. So let's see, just looking at a couple of the other fees on the fee schedule here to relate to here. If you back way up to before there's even a building permit, there are sometimes land use reviews where there's the sort of conceptually what somebody's planning to do. And that needs to go through a land use review to apply Title 33 requirements. And that's all managed by the Bureau of Development Services. But again, we are a reviewer that participate in it. And that's alongside with the other infrastructure bureaus as well. And then sometimes there are projects that require an early assistance meeting. An early assistance meeting is essentially bringing together city entities to describe to an applicant what requirements may apply to their project that they're proposing. So in some cases, when they're pretty big projects, that's required, and that on the fee schedule is the pre-application conference. And then in some cases, it's a voluntary thing. Somebody thinks they want to do something, but they're not exactly sure. They want to know maybe what costs are associated, what types of permitting is going to be required, and that is where there's early assistance. And so an applicant can choose to just have a written one. So they'd submit their materials, urban forestry and all the other infrastructure bureaus would review those materials and provide a written response explaining what our permitting requirements would be, or they can choose to have a meeting as well so they can kind of talk it out with applicants. That is primarily what you're looking at on the fee schedule there. So I'm going to move on. So capital improvement projects, they probably function the most different from the rest of what we do within permitting and regulation. And again, that's because those projects are typically internal to the city. And they're, it's another bureau that's performing work, but that still requires tree code application. And so you don't really see anything on the fee schedule as it relates specifically to capital, except if you look at the very top of the fee schedule, there's an hourly rate. And so the way in which our tree inspectors are working on capital projects is that they're charging their time
as they're working on the review of those projects. There are some nuances to that. For example, some capital projects might trigger a public works permit. So they're also going to go through the public works permitting process. Or they might be, for example, in parks, they might be building a bathroom in association to a new park. And so that's going to trigger some building permits as well. So it's not always just an hourly charge, because there may be other permitting requirements that get triggered in the grand scheme of what that capital project is. But that's in general why you don't really see capital projects listed out here on the fee schedule. Okay, and then our newest team. So the compliance team, as I mentioned, they are typically responding to either alleged violations, nuisance situations. So kind of looking at that left-hand picture there, that's something that somebody may call and say, I'm really nervous about this tree that my neighbor has. And that would be an inspection that the compliance team would come out to take a look at, make a determination as to whether that tree needs to come out or some work needs to be done on it to make it safe. On the right-hand top side, that's emergency response. That's a pretty dramatic one. But that could be a situation where it wouldn't look like that when we show up, because again, urban forestry operations would have taken care of the immediate hazard, but likely what would be left there is 2 empty spaces for new trees to be planted. And that's what the compliance team would be coming in to require. And then on the bottom right-hand side, the compliance team is also going to be looking at verifying compliance with permits that have been issued. So go back to the non-development team who's issuing removal replant permits. And a condition of that permit is that they have to replant trees. Up until this point, we really have not had the ability to be able to go and check all of those. And that's going to be one of the tasks of our compliance team, to actually go back and verify our trees planted and our permitting requirements being met. So in looking at the fee schedule in relationship to this team, it's the very bottom component of that fee schedule. And it's really when things aren't getting done. That's what most of those fees that you're looking at are. So there is no sort of forward-facing fee for the compliance team, which is a really good point, because that's why it's been such a difficult challenge to create one, because there is no sort of cost that comes back in for the work that they're doing, because they're sort of checking things because the public have just asked somebody to take a look at it, or there's been an emergency situation. And so as you start to work through violation cases, there are fees, penalties that can be applied if people are not responding. So take a look at the left-hand side picture there. Let's say a tree inspector did issue a notice of nuisance saying, hey, this tree is really unsafe. It needs to be removed and replaced. A property owner will be given a certain amount of time to address that situation. And if they don't address that situation, then that's when some of these penalties that you see in the fee schedule would start to be applied. In that specific case, it could go down 2 routes. One, if we really believe that it is a safety hazard, then it would go down a nuisance abatement route, meaning we would cause the tree to be removed and we would charge the property owner for that removal. And again, on the fee schedule, that's where you're seeing nuisance abatement charges. The other route that it could go, because that's a very expensive route, the nuisance abatement, is if it's not a safety situation, let's say it's a stump and it needs to be ground in a tree replanted, then we would apply if you see on your fee schedule, the enforcement penalty. Sorry, I have yours. And that an enforcement penalty is a monthly, essentially, lien that gets placed on a property until they complete the work. And so that's less costly than it is to perform nuisance abatement. And so every situation sort of has this assessment as to whether there is potential impact to life, safety, infrastructure. And in that case, it goes down a nuisance abatement route. If it is not that, then it typically will go down a monthly enforcement route.
And then there are certain situations where we can take a case to code hearings. Code hearings is sort of the internal court to the city. So let's say we really can't get somebody to comply with a requirement. We can choose to take them to code hearings to try to further get them to comply. But on the other hand, if we issue a notice to a property owner, they can also choose to take us to code hearings and essentially, you know, argue that we're incorrect or that we're applying the code correctly. So that avenue is available for both parties, and it has gone down both avenues in the past. And so you see that on there, there's the code hearings filing penalty, and that is for when they are choosing to take us, because that's a lot of work on our ends to prepare for a code hearings case. It really and truly is like a mini court. Our attorney gets involved. We have to demonstrate our case. We get called up to the stands to essentially state the situation that's going on. So it is quite time consuming and a lot of work to prepare. So that is sort of in a very quick nutshell, the permitting and regulation program and somewhat how it relates to the fee schedule. But I imagine that there might be a number of questions, and I'm happy to take questions. And if I can't answer them, I'll take them down and try to get back to you. But I'll open it up to questions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you be willing to unshare your screen
Yes.
and then see everybody? Try. Stop. Thank you. Any questions for Casey Jokerst? Commissioner Nelson?
I came in a little late, so maybe you addressed it. Is compliance only dealing with street trees, or does it deal with trees on private property?
It's both.
Okay, and
city properties.
So if I have a tree in my backyard and it's leaning, so can a neighbor contact you to say that this tree is a danger and needs to be taken out, and then the city comes on to my property to look at the tree to see if it's a danger? Is that legal?
That's a great question. So anybody can call. So the first part of that is correct. Yes, a neighbor can call and say, hey, I think that my neighbor's tree is dangerous and is perhaps going to fall into my yard or on my garage or on my property. So what we typically do is ask, is there a viewing point from your property, and would you allow us on your property to take a look at that tree? Because we do not have the legal authority to go on the property of the neighbors. And so oftentimes the people who are calling it in, will grant us a viewing point. And if we aren't able to get a good enough view, then we can't pursue it. But we can send sometimes letters to the actual property owner, just notifying them, saying, hey, we've been called to attention this, you may want to take a look at your tree, provide them some resources to where they can, tree care provider resources to take a look at it. But we can't pursue it if we can't confirm that there really is a situation. Most times they are able to verify it. It's those rare properties that maybe have lots of trees where it's really hard to see, or there really just is no viewpoint at which the tree inspectors can really confirm that there's an issue. And sometimes it really isn't a dangerous situation and it's a neighbor conflict. So there's a number of those that we call unfounded, where we just have to sort of advise the property owners that this is really a neighborly situation. We can't get involved in it, but recommend that you contact your neighbor and talk it out with them.
So in code language, is it the reference to hazardous trees that the city forester has? Is that the authority that allows you to do this?
It's the dangerous tree. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Question.
Commissioner Platt.
Thanks, Casey, Manager Jogurst, for the presentation. So in the realm of development, only urban forestry is working primarily in the planning department for right-of-way trees. In the development services are the bureau responsible for the on-site trees. Is there anything that you're working on to get an urban forestry arborist to work with or under development services in order to make that review? Because to my understanding, there are no arborists reviewing plans that come in for the on-site trees. So for example, if urban forestry goes out to do a tree preservation inspection, they are often looking at the work and the recommendations that they themselves have not necessarily reviewed. And then if it's incorrect, then it goes back. I know you probably have a lot of experience with this.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Platt. So yes, we have been trying to work on that for quite some time. What we do have set up right now is a consultation service. So it's not the end goal, but it is progress in which planning and zoning is the team at the Bureau of Development Services that performs that on-site plan review. And if they, for example, get a plan that is using a type of preservation that requires an arborist report, they are not trained to really be reviewing arborist reports. So they can request a consultation from us where we'll take a look at that and we'll sort of assist them with it. Again, that's at their request. So it's not yet a system in terms of getting forestry to be a part of that. But I will say that with part of the single permitting authority and the government transition that's going on, that there are conversations in relation to that exact topic in terms of getting the experts where they need to be in order to not have the situation that you're talking about, which for others that don't know, when the tree inspectors go on site to verify tree preservation according to the final plans and it's incorrect, they have to bounce the applicant back into a revision process. And this is highly contentious because revisions require time and money, and in development, that's not what you want to happen. And so there's a good case to be made for forestry reviewing not just street trees, but all trees in development, because they really are the subject matter experts. And this would then help prevent these revisions from happening, because they would be looking at it from the get-go instead of non-tree professionals assessing, reviewing, making requirements, and then handing it off to forestry. And that's what Commissioner Clapp is referencing. So a work in progress, and perhaps with the new single permitting entity that is coming about with the government transition, that more progress will be made.
I have a quick follow-up question to that one. So when applicant is determining tree preservation, the 1/3 of the trees that are 12 inches in diameter or greater, and they don't have to include in their analysis the trees that are dead, dying, or dangerous. And somebody has to determine whether those trees are dead, dying, or dangerous. And at this point, it's the developer's arborist. Is that correct? Is that a place where they might bring you in for consultation to say, is this tree really dead, dying, or dangerous, or is it not? Or does that connection usually happen? Because that initial calculation is really important in terms of how many trees need to be preserved.
I will say that most commonly, they are not calling us out for dead, dying, dangerous. What they are asking us for consulting on is if a tree reaches a 36-inch diameter, it sets it off into a new sort of cost as it relates to the tree code. And so if somebody says a tree is 35 inches, they'll say, forestry, can you go out and site inspect that and verify it? And again, if there's the preservation, there's two types of tree preservation in the tree code. One is sort of a prescribed, this is just a standard. That doesn't require an arborist report, but if they want to use a different type of protection, then they need to have an arborist report that describes how and why that truly will protect the tree. And that's another common occurrence where they'd request urban forestry to review that arborist report to say it would this, because they really don't have the expertise to assess that.
And by protection, I think, so for folks that you're talking about fencing and the root protection zone at that point, it's not.
It could be that. It could be that they're proposing not to put up fencing, but they're going to put down boards and mulch. the standard would be a fence that's a certain distance from the trunk of the tree, and then anything outside of that is where there would need to be some justification as to how that's going to truly protect it.
Thank you. Commissioner Nelson.
Do you feel like you have adequate technology support to handle the compliance component? In the past, for the 5-year levy, one of the requests of urban forestry was to get some updated computer technology that was appropriate for you. And I know there was a personnel disappeared. And I just wondered, compliance is a big one. Do you have the capacity to actually deal with it?
We are building the capacity as we speak right now. We can always use better technology. So thank you, Bruce, by all means. But I feel confident that we can manage the program and make incredible progress with what we have right now. And that will only continue to improve if we can get better technology in association with it. But it's, you know, the compliance was already occurring to a degree. It was spanned out across the different tree inspector teams. So while I say it's new in that it has a focused team and the ability to perform more. Whereas before it was very minimal, but it was still happening. And I bring that up because with that, it was already somewhat incorporated into the technology that we use. So again, always can make improvements. And I sure hope that one day we get our own like tree asset management system and that we're not necessarily working in a system that's really meant for building permits. But I do feel comfortable and confident that we'll be able to manage the team and the program with what we have at the moment.
Great, good.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Manager Jogers. I wanted to add some response to Commissioner Nelson's question about software. We are piloting a tree asset management and workflow software system, and it is part of levy funding for the Bureau's, Portland Parks and Recreation's larger asset management system, software system to be updated and replaced. So that is happening, and thanks for remembering and bringing it up.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on one thing you said, Manager Jogers, about the transition to, did you say a single permitting system? What was the term you used?
Single permitting authority.
Okay.
I think you can all still hear me. I just got bumped, but since I'm on the bigger screen, can you all still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask about that because this is, in my experience as a tree inspector, that was one of the biggest issues, was essentially the my code versus your code world, where PBOT has their code, which is different from our code, from your code, when it really is, you know, one code for the city. Everyone should be working together. So I wanted to know, what is your role, or whose role is it who is involved in making sure that urban forestry is positioned at the table and making sure that we're putting ourselves as a higher priority than I believe it's historically been? And if you can give us any updates on kind of where that's at.
Sure. Thanks. So the single permitting authority is being managed by Chief Administrative Officer Michael Jordan. So he's the responsible authority for that. And I can't remember Terry's last name. Terry Tyson, thank you, is sort of the manager for the permitting transition, I guess I'll call it. Mm-hmm. And CAO Michael Jordan and Terry Tyson have put together a technical advisory group of made up of all the various entities that would potentially be incorporated within the single permitting authority. And we do have a representative that sits on that team. Okay. So that forestry does have a voice, and that they're being truly considered in terms of how to best organize this new entity that they're working to build. And I also myself sit on the Permitting Improvement Task Force, and that's That's a weekly meeting that I have with that. And that's myself and the other division managers from the infrastructure bureaus that are on continuously having conversations about how are we organized and how can things work, how do things work already and how can things work better, and trying to understand each other's structures because I'd say urban forestry probably has the most unique one, but the Water Bureau is pretty close second. And then the Bureau of Environmental Services and the Portland Bureau of Transportation are the most aligned in terms of like how they're structured. But the short answer to your question is that on that technical advisory group, there is an urban forestry representative that is there to speak for forestry and make sure that they're considered as they start to build this new structure.
Okay.
And then what was your second question?
It was, I think that was mostly it, but I guess I wanted to know how urban forestry is making sure that we are there. So we have a representative, wonderful. Is that representative empowered to speak at the level of other people? So I think of making sure that if there is a group of managers, that they're all managers. If there is a group of supervisors, all supervisors. Is urban forestry at the table to make sure that they are not just at the table because there needs to be a representative at the table, but is urban forestry positioning themselves to say, we are not just this nice thing to have around, we don't prioritize this, and then trees. Are we working with this opportunity with the new government, the new planning system to say, here are the rules, just the same as you have your rules. That's not necessarily more important than this. So is there, I guess, what is urban forestry doing aside from that to make sure that we are backing up everything that we are trying to say so that it has an equal seat at the table rather than just a seat at the table? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. And I'd say it's happening really at all levels. I know that Director Long is having conversations both with CEO Jordan and Director Esau from the Bureau of Development Services. I believe that City Forester Cairo has also met with Michael Jordan. Although it's happening very quickly, it is still at the very beginning. And so I'd say at all levels, the conversation is still very high priority and happening as we're speaking. But exactly what you just described is what we're working for.
Gotcha.
And making sure that our voices are heard, and that forestry is considered, and really not just forestry, that the urban canopy is going to be managed within this new entity.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I just wanted to end to give my plug that, the city has multiple different management plans and climate action plans. We are technically in a climate emergency. So I think that as just a commissioner on this board, if I can provide my opinion that to really encourage that urban forestry say, we are the active participants to try to solve what we are in, which is an emergency. Therefore, this needs to be at a higher level. Work with us, please. Just to make sure that everyone understands that this is a very serious thing. Not that you are not, I just wanted to add my opinion to it.
Yeah, all help is appreciated. And I think that link that City Forester Cairo put in the chat earlier is where, or not link, but the email address of where you can make comments. That is also the appropriate place to be making comments as it relates to the single permitting authority. So you can use that same address. But yeah, by all means, we appreciate any and all advocacy.
Thank you guys very much.
So sometimes, we can, there's times where you think it would be helpful for the Forestry Commission to consider something and weigh in as a commission. It would be helpful to know that.
Thank you. Historically, nature, in my experience as the city forester here in previous roles, is secondary to build infrastructure, as Manager Jogerst has expressed and Commissioner Clapp has asked us to represent. We actively represent that nature, including trees, be at the same table with built infrastructure in many ways and every day. It is a cultural value structure, I think, that we're really talking about. It's not just regulations or permits or forest management plans or climate management plans. And so I would say this is a key role for the Forestry Commission that if you want nature and trees to be of higher priority, it's really about trying to change that value system, to me, first and foremost, with the primary decision makers in the city. And so we will continue to let you know when there are issues around that you might be interested in engaging in. And I just encourage you as commissioners to work with folks you know to always be representing that in whatever way you can if it's important to you. Thanks.
Well, if there's no more burning questions, it's time for us to move on to our next item. I will end by saying that for the reasons just discussed, and without having more information about rationale, what you were talking about in your city forester's report, it makes me nervous about the rebundling of the bureaus, because the earlier bundle package had, you know, Parks and Recreation in with the infrastructure bureaus, and this one does not. And I think this relates directly to what you're talking about. And I would love to find out more about the rationale for that. And so I guess you've provided some information, contact information for us to inquire. And I think I'd like to inquire about the rationale for that. And anyone else can too, the commission, and see what we can learn about that repackaging, because I think it's significant in terms of its implications potentially. So, okay, so we're going to move on to community agreements. The last time we discussed this as a commission was in July, so a few months ago, and we've had some great agenda items and time-sensitive stuff in between. The commission received a revised draft yesterday, and so I think initially we had hoped that we could talk through this and potentially get kind of an action to approve this as our first community agreements package, knowing that we would be updating it on a not frequent, a regular basis or reviewing it anyway, and making sure that it doesn't need to be updated, or it does need to be updated. But if we need more time to review it, well, let me ask first of all: are there folks who have not had a chance to look this new draft over since yesterday? And we could even take a couple minutes to do that right now. It's not overly long. Would anyone like a little bit of time to take a look? Jennifer McMillan and others. So we have a little time. Why don't we take like 3 minutes or so and let people look this over, and we'll just see how far we can get in discussing it and getting some feedback. And then Commissioner Bechtold is going to lead the discussion. Thank you. It came as an email from Jen Cairo yesterday. Okay. Commissioner Bechtold, would you like to kick this off?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Jortner. Along with Commissioner Jortner and Commissioner Lilly, we have been working to incorporate the comments we received from the last meeting and also via email. Melinda, I see your hand up.
Yeah, with the document that Jen sent out, it didn't track changes. So I think I just specifically would like to know what has been updated in this previous document.
I will send that to you now, to everyone. Any other thoughts or comments about the draft? Here.
Commissioner Nelson.
On the commissioner duties, just didn't understand, agree to adhere to neutral time. I've never heard that particular phrasing before. What does that refer to?
So on the agenda, we usually have time limits for each topic. So adhering to the time that's allocated on a topic neutrally. So not extending any party's additional time on a particular topic to get through the agenda.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments off the bat? I can say that in terms of changes, primarily it was, again, responding to some of the comments that came in terms of clarifying some of the bullets, consolidating some, and then added a suggested learning resources section, which Commissioner Ihanacho recommended with some resources to provide. Commissioner McMillan, are you able to see the changes that you wanted? You haven't seen the
I didn't see a document come in. I mean, I have the updated document. I just don't know what has been changed.
Okay.
I don't need to sit here and compare two documents if someone just wants to say, hey, we changed language of this.
Well, for example,
yes, I sent. I'm sorry. I did send it via email. It just may take a moment. But I responded to Jen's email and added the revised version.
It just dropped in our email.
Oh, gotcha.
Would we like to share screen and share? Or folks see it?
I just got it, yeah.
Commissioner Meisner.
Yeah, thanks. I guess the only comment I have is that, like, I know this gets brought up every couple months, and like I brought up my concerns with this, not necessarily based on the community agreement itself, but the circumstances that it came up and some of the involvement in it. And I know, like, last meeting we talked about potential restorative justice processes. I don't know. I guess I would just appreciate if we just put this on hold for now, just because it's kind of triggering every time we bring this up, to be honest.
Commissioner Meisner, can I ask some questions to better understand how we can support you in your request. Do you think that so it sounds like I understand this being triggering based on the events that happened. Is there, and I apologize for not being on camera, I'm having issues with my computer. Do you think that the working on that process for that, the resolution process, creating something separately like a restorative justice resolution process would address your concerns? Or is it just the community agreement itself is something that you can't discuss at this time?
I guess I would say it's more of, I would like some sort of restorative justice process to take place before continuing with this community agreement, because the community agreement is part of, part of the issue that has happened. Like it is part of the issue, and so continuing on with the community agreement just brings up everything else because it's a part of that, if that makes sense.
Yes, okay, I understand what you're saying. So when you're talking about restorative justice, you're actually talking about resolution of the previous situation, not creating a general process for us to follow. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, I hear you. I think that, and I apologize, I did not know that that wasn't resolved. So that may be something we need to think about if that is an issue. I encourage us to, I would like to see us move forward on both of those fronts separately. I do think it's important to have a community agreement amongst us for our operating, but recognize that there's an issue pending. And I think if we need to pivot and talk about it, we should. Because I don't, to the extent that this is keeping us from moving forward holistically as a group, it needs to be addressed by the group. Jen?
Thank you, Commissioner Bechtold. I wanted to express again, for everyone's benefit, including Commissioner Meissner, that we have presented on and discussed avenues for concerns about Forestry Commission operations and processes and commission members, as well as city staff. And those have included bringing those concerns directly to the city staff involved or their supervisors, also to the chairs of the commission. And we also arranged for Commissioner Meissner to meet with our equity and inclusion manager a couple of months ago. And I believe that happened. I do know that happened. And we've also been pursuing other avenues to work with Commissioner Meissner to address his concerns, including engaging with external facilitation. So those remain ongoing and have been going on for a few months now.
Yeah, I guess just so everyone's aware, I met with the facilitators and I haven't heard from them recently, so I don't know if you know more, Jen, if this is still gonna go through the process.
Yeah, Commissioner Meissner, yes. We haven't heard back from facilitators yet, and they're on their own time frame that we are all navigating. I just wanted to make clear that we have heard you, and we respect your concerns, and we have actively used a number of different tools to try to get those addressed.
Commissioner Clapp.
I guess I would be curious as to know if there's a way that we could move forward, or if this is more of a proposal to just table this and not try to come to a resolution to any of the other issues. I know it sounds like you're working on it. I guess I know I've missed the last two meetings and I've reviewed the minutes, but I guess I wasn't aware that there was still kind of something that was lingering that I'm not sure if any other commissioners have been aware of that. So I guess I'm curious how we can resolve and come together. I was hoping that this was going to be that opportunity, but I want to be sensitive to the fact that that's not, and I want to see if there's a means for us to do that, and if I can be involved in somehow with the rest of the commission.
So I think at this point, it does not appear that we're going to be able to move and approve on the community agreement. So I asked my fellow commissioners to review the changes that were made and provide any additional follow-up comments on the draft agreements that have been circulated. And, you know, request that we move forward with some type of resolution to Commissioner Meisner's concern so that we can holistically move forward. That would be my recommendation.
Commissioner Nelson.
I believe the Urban Forestry Commission has operated without a community agreement guidelines for a number of years. And I would suggest we continue to do that until there seems to be a consensus on revisiting this.
Anyone else have any thoughts? Commissioner Lilly.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner Meiser, for sharing and sort of being invulnerable in this moment. I appreciate your voice to this, and I might recommend adding language to the proposal, or just Commissioner Nelson said, share until we arrive at a consensus moment at this time, to put this forward again. And I might be looking to you to indicate like when that would feel most appropriate. And instead of like checking in every month or something, just you indicate to the chairs or something like that you're comfortable and ready to move forward with this.
Yeah, I can do that.
Any other thoughts? Okay, sounds like we're prepared to put this on hold and continue with the process of reconciliation. And Commissioner Meisner is going to let us know when we can pick this up again, and or if there's other things that need to be addressed. And as Commissioner Bechtold suggested, in the meantime, you know, if folks are comfortable reviewing what's here so far and providing any feedback, that might facilitate that process when we get back to it. Okay. Thanks. Next we have Belinda Udelman and our Urban Forest Plan update.
All right, so at this point, there's not too much of an update on the Urban Forest Plan itself. As Judd mentioned, we're working, Lady Forester Cairo mentioned, we are moving forward and on track with that process. And so at this time, we are looking to confirm the way that the Urban Forestry Commission would like to be involved in that process moving forward, and to vote and formally approve that. So in the prior meetings, we have heard that there's an interest in having a commissioner member serve as a representative on our community advisory committee, and to also have a subcommittee, which could either be the policy subcommittee or a separate subcommittee of this group that provides a more direct role in serving as an advisory commission or advisory board on this project. So I want to confirm with everyone that that is the approach that we want to take. So that's having a subcommittee and a representative on our community advisory committee. That is the first thing. And then vote on who the representative should be for the community advisory committee.
Right, and I believe that there has been interest expressed by Commissioner McMillan and Commissioner Iannacho and I think Commissioner Plack in participating in one or both of those roles. And I guess my question is, you know, in terms of a subcommittee, just kind of weighing that a little bit. I think Commissioner Nelson raised that a little some time ago about a separate subcommittee for the policy committee. And there was some concern about having the policy committee be the committee because there's other issues we have to deal with. But so I'm just circling back to folks. You know, if there's a separate, what would you envision for a subcommittee? What's the time commitment, and how often would that committee be working with you outside of these meetings here?
Yeah, I would envision them sort of meeting as kind of as frequently as we're meeting with our other advisory boards, which we're thinking is about 6 times throughout the planning process. So we're starting now. So maybe the first meeting would be 2 months, we'll say. And then have the next series of meetings. They would be done by early 2025 or late 2024.
So you're saying 6 meetings over
that time period.
A year and a half to 2 years kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So quarterly-ish.
Yeah.
Or maybe
depending.
Not.
Yeah, I think it'll
depend
on how the project goes.
So I believe Commissioner McMillan, you had expressed interest in serving as a representative on the advisory committee that has the broader representation in community members. Is that correct?
Yes. We also, I think, when I expressed interest, one of the things that we discussed was maybe having 2 representatives just to make sure that one of us was available for those meetings. If it's that infrequently, I know I would be able to do that, but that might be something that we look at, is having 2 representatives and just making sure that one of us is available.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Is anyone, Linda or others, interested in serving on a special subcommittee over the period of the project that would have a kind of a deeper dive into the planning process? And or it's possible that, I mean, the policy committee right now, Commissioner Vandermark, Nelson, and myself are on that from the commission. It could be that, I mean, those meetings are regularly scheduled on a monthly basis, and it could be that periodically, you know, 3 more of the commissioners would come to that group and participate there. But who would be interested in being in that deeper dive mode, or are folks interested in kind of working with the policy committee as an existing kind of platform?
I think either works. I know we also received different proposals for changes to the subcommittee's bylaws. I think that kind of might affect if we do a separate committee versus including it in the policy committee. As far as having like outside non-UFC members be voting members of the subcommittee.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Commissioner Nelson?
Those bylaws haven't been brought to UFC nor adopted, so they're not in place currently. There are no bylaws for the policy committee. So I would think if we formed this subcommittee prior to the passing of those bylaws, that those bylaws wouldn't affect, because you'd have precedent.
Yeah, that's true. In addition, I wouldn't envision that discussions with staff or others as part of the subgroup would involve voting.
Right.
It's really just, you know, a collaborative approach to talking through some of the concepts that are going to be in the plan, whether it's policies or canopy targets or whatever it is. So it wouldn't be kind of a voting type of situation, I wouldn't think. It'd be just folks wanting to spend a little more time than some of us have to dive deep into this. And since Commissioners Plack and Joe are not here, it's a little tricky to figure out what they might want to do if subcommittee or not. Go ahead.
Analyst Judelman, what's the due date for knowing names?
By the next meeting would be great, because we're working on the schedule now. So,
well, we can revisit the subcommittee piece then, but we also potentially could vote to establish Commissioner McMillan on your broader advisory committee today, if folks are comfortable doing that. And I am, and then we could have volunteer for either a second person or an alternate, and we can take action on that later. Senator Nelson?
I move that UFC approve Melinda McMillan to be a member of the Community Advisory Committee, and that at a later date we determine who the second person would be to serve as alternate.
Second?
A second.
Senator Clapp, second. All in favor? Any objections or abstentions? A thumbs up. Thank you very much for volunteering to do that. Appreciate it a lot, and look forward to hearing from what you experienced there. And as I think Commissioner Lilly mentioned at some point, those would be open to the public, so any of us could attend those and to learn and to listen. So participate.
Great. I look forward to it.
Yeah. So,
but for the record, I just wanted to say that I should have done this before, I think, because Brian will have to do the minutes. All commissioners were in favor of Commissioner McMillan serving in that role. No abstention.
It's unanimous.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll let's think about the subcommittee piece. Maybe we'll do a reminder to have folks think about whether they'd like to participate in something like that before the next meeting. We can take a look, a few minutes, and see if we've got a critical mass to do that.
yeah, that's great.
And also let's acknowledge that two people were interested and they were both not here. And if they both want to step up and we're all assigned, I'm fine with that. It doesn't have to be two. We could do three if they want it. So.
Okay.
So just to clarify, Commissioner Jortner, so at the next meeting, we need to have names final so the project can continue. So maybe we should do some email with Commissioner Plack and Commissioner Ivanaccio about what their interests might be and can they attend the next meeting so that we're sure to get that completed. Okay. It is a big project and it's on a budget that's being pushed already, so we're trying to keep it on track.
Right. So Commissioner Nelson.
I move that we agree to appoint Commissioner Ivanaccio and Commissioner Plack to the Community Advisory Committee if they so choose to serve.
Just a quick question about that. Having 3 representatives on Community Advisory Committee, is that appropriate composition wise? Or I mean, I've seen it done where sometimes there's a person And there's sort of an alternate, if you will, and that alternate is encouraged to be there as many times as possible so that there's continuity. I'm just thinking about, you know, being sensitive to the community members and kind of having equitable representation.
Yeah,
on that broader group.
Yeah, I appreciate that consideration. I don't want to take away from the voices of the community members, but I think it's appropriate to have, I think maybe one person is sort of mostly filling that role of the speaking for the Urban Forestry Commission, if appropriate at that meeting, and the alternates, whether it's one or two, they can be there, but are a little bit more in the background observing, so they're on the same page.
And then if the primary is not able to attend, then they may step in and be the full voice. So I think what we're hearing is perhaps friendly amendment to nominate Commissioner Plack and Ianacho as alternates, if they're willing to serve in that role for that committee, and then also we can adjust that if either of them or others of us want to serve on the subcommittee as well. Bruce, is that okay for your motion? Second on that? Okay, Commissioner McMillan seconds. All in favor? Any opposition or abstentions? Is your hands up? Okay. All right. All in favor, all voted in favor. Any closing thoughts from anybody? All right, we are 7 minutes ahead of schedule. Enjoy your 7 extra minutes of your day. We'll see you next month.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.